Welcome back to another edition of Know the Foe. I'm Andrew Hutchinson, the managing editor of HawgBeat.com, your Arkansas site in the Rivals Network. After a big win over Mississippi State, the Hogs are ranked once again, checking in at number 25 in the latest CFP rankings. And now they hit the road for another big game in Baton Rouge against the LSU Tigers. With that, it's time once again to go behind enemy lines for some insider perspective on that upcoming game. Julie Boudwin covers the Tigers for TigerDetails.com, the LSU site in the Rivals Network. So she was kind enough to give us some time today. Julie, appreciate it. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Andrew. I'm excited to see what this game in Baton Rouge is going to look like. It's been a while since Arkansas has gotten it done in Baton Rouge, but I think they have a legitimate chance this year.
Yeah, I think so too. But before we dive into that game, I want to get kind of a big picture question for you.
Okay.
Um, what the heck is going on down in Baton Rouge right now? I know just 2 years ago they were having one of the best seasons ever, and now here we are. Ed Orgeron's on his way out. What is going on from your perspective there on the ground?
Man, what's not going on, really? I think if I could pinpoint it, then I'd be in a much better, a much higher paying job position. I don't know if I can put my finger on it. Honestly, I don't know if LSU and Ed Ogeron and Scott Woodward, I don't know if they can put their finger on it. There's, um, from roster turnover to injuries. Last year, we saw a lot of opt outs. The 5-5 season last year, it kind of felt like that could have been COVID related. But now we're seeing that it's not necessarily COVID related. There was a lot of turnover after that 2019 year. A lot of guys went on to the league. They had a lot of staff take changeover. So it's a lot of things. I don't think you can put your finger on one thing. And it's kind of become the result of what you're seeing. Ed Ogeron is going to wrap up this coaching career at LSU in the next 3 games, and then he's on his way out in Baton Rouge, and there's going to be a new coach down here in a couple of weeks. We don't know who that's going to be just yet, but I don't think you can put your finger on it. I think it's a lot of things, and it's certainly not what anybody expected to start this season because there's so much talent in Baton Rouge. But yeah, injuries, man. Injuries have really, really hurt the team this year.
Yeah, that's good. Lead me right in my next question. It seems like that's been a huge story this year. I think something like 13 starters or something like that. What's the latest on the Tigers injury situation? Are there anybody coming back or any more players out for this week?
Yeah, I was before we started recording this, I was telling you kind of this worked out because it is Wednesday night when we're filming this. So Ed Ogeron just wrapped up his weekly radio show, and he just revealed that another starter is lost for the season. And Chasen Hines, who is an offensive lineman, he's lost for the season. And then Ed Ingram, who starting this year was considered to probably be their best offensive lineman. He's going to definitely be out for Arkansas. We'll see what happens the rest of the way. But yeah, about 13 players. That sounds about right. Players who've started a handful of games this year. Mason Smith, who was the number 1 player for Rivals last year, he's got a right leg injury. He missed the Alabama game. In fact, he didn't even travel with the team last week to Alabama. He's going to miss this game. There is some potential that he could come back for the Texas A&M game, which is the last game of the year for LSU, but we'll have to see. He might be the only one that jumps out that might be able to make it back this year. But yeah, injuries, 13 starters, that's a lot. It's hard to overcome.
Yeah, and I know earlier this week too, Coach O kind of made some headlines when he revealed, at least to me, a surprising development with the quarterback situation that Max Johnson is still the starter, but sounds like true freshman Garrett Nussmeier is also going to be getting significant reps this week. Did that surprise you at all? And how do you see that kind of playing out?
I don't know if I was surprised by it. Max Johnson, I mean, he struggled in the game against Alabama. He held on to the ball a little too long, and Ed admitted that. And I mean, obviously, everybody everybody kind of struggles against Alabama because they've been so successful over the years. And he is only a sophomore, and so he does still have the room for the growth and things that he does have to get better at. but kind of like you said, you were surprised. He's up at the top in most of the statistics, especially in the SEC. He's not necessarily losing games for them. But I think Nussmeier, he brings a different kind of juice to the team. He's much more mobile than Max. He brings a spark, and I think that we're going to see that against Arkansas. They're splitting reps this week in practice, 50-50. Basically Ed Ogeron basically said whoever is the goes out there in the game on Saturday, and whoever's playing the best is who's going to stay out there on the field the longest. So at this point, you really don't have anything to lose, right? Like, give the youngster a shot. They've seen sparks, so why not give them a shot?
And sticking on that offensive side of the ball, you mentioned injuries earlier. One of those guys was Keishawn Butte, the star wide receiver, put up huge numbers. He's out now. I'm curious who else on that side of the ball are people Arkansas should be aware of on that side of the ball, and what are their strengths? What do they do well?
Who should Arkansas fans be watching as far as receivers go for LSU?
Just offensive playmakers, whether it be receivers, running backs, tight ends.
Yeah.
Who should they be keeping an eye on?
Look, obviously you can't replace a star receiver like Keishawn Butte. When it is time for him to go to the league, he is going to be a first round draft pick. There's no doubt in my mind that is going to be what happens for him. But the only positive side of this is LSU is stacked in the wide receiver department. Now, I'm saying that, but those receivers are all freshmen. They don't really have that, the playing experience. They haven't really had as much playing time with the quarterbacks because they're freshmen. But Jack Best jumps out. He's a hybrid. He plays a little receiver, a little tight end. Malik Neighbors, another freshman out of Lafayette, Louisiana. He can go up and get the ball. We've seen flashes from him. We've seen another freshman right outside of Baton Rouge from Walker, Brian Thomas Jr. And then as far as running backs go, Ty Davis Price, he's kind of really come on the last couple of weeks. He had a 100-yard rushing game last week against Alabama, which is kind of hard to do. So, they really, really want to get that running game going. It'll be very interesting to see now with these latest two offensive linemen out, how that may or may not change the game plan. But I would say those are a couple of names that I'd be on the lookout for.
Now, flipping over to the defensive side, how was LSU able to contain Alabama so well last week? And is that something sustainable that they could use this week against Arkansas and the rest of the season?
It's interesting because that's certainly not what any of us expected. They came out. They really used that bye week for what it's for. They changed some things around defensively. They put in, I want to say Ogeron said they put in like 8 different defensive schemes, plays, however you want to word it. And then they blitzed. They blitzed more in that Alabama game than they have blitzed the rest of the season combined. Durante Jones, who's the first-year defensive coordinator, it doesn't seem like he's a blitzing kind of guy. We haven't seen much blitzing. It's been something that the fans, especially on our message board, has talked a lot about, is where's the blitzes. But against Alabama, that changed, and they came after Bryce Young, and it showed. Obviously, the score showed. LSU came up just short. Honestly, if you go back and you really watch that game, they left some things out on the field. They probably should have won that game. Is it sustainable? I don't know, only because of the injuries. Their entire secondary is just depleted. What we saw out there was second and third string guys. And I don't know if it's sustainable for the last 3 games of the season, quite honestly. Once you show your hand, the other teams will start to figure it out. So because it was something new and something that they hadn't done, maybe that caught Alabama off guard of sorts. So we'll see this week. I'm really unsure of how this defense is going to look this week. And I'm sure they'll stick to some of the blitzing, but I don't think we'll see it as much as what we saw against Alabama.
And something I always like to ask the people who cover these teams is if you're an offensive coordinator, how would you personally attack LSU's defense? And are there like certain areas that you would try to exploit, weaknesses, things like that?
Well, with the number of injuries, I mean, if you would have asked me this to start this season, I would have been really unsure how to answer it. I probably would have said linebackers to start the season, but the linebacker play has really improved. It's probably the most improved play on the defense as a whole. And Damone Clark, who's an absolute stud, is leading the nation in tackles. Now with the injuries, I'd probably say the secondary, which is weird because it's LSU, it's DBU. But I mean, that's second string, it's third stringers, it's guys that haven't gotten many reps. And if one of those guys go down with an injury, then you're really scrambling to try to figure that out. So I'd probably say the secondary. And the D line has had some injuries, but when I look at it now, it's still the strongest part of their defense.
And we've talked about that Alabama game quite a bit now, and I think it surprised a lot of people. And to me, at least, I feel like there's a couple of ways you can look at last week's game. I'm wondering, for your perspective, do you think that was maybe evidence that LSU's maybe turned a little bit of a corner and they're going to really go down swinging for Coach O, or is it almost like that was their Super Bowl and a emotional letdown is almost imminent?
I hope it's not the second option. Because I mean, they haven't qualified for a bowl game, and I don't know. I mean, I'd have to go back and look. I mean, it's been it's been a while since LSU hasn't qualified for a bowl game. It's been a long time, over 20 years, I think, that they've had a losing season. Um, so yeah, there's still a lot to play for. I don't think the players want Ed to go out on a losing streak. They've lost two in a row now. They lost four of the last five. And like I said earlier, the talent level, I mean, obviously the injuries, yes, but they still have talent across the board. And they just have to find a way to put it together, stick together. Um, the mentality last week against Alabama seemed different. Could it have been because it was LSU Alabama and there's always, there's always a little bit more juice in those type of games? Probably, but I don't think they want to go out on a losing streak, and I do think that it would mean a lot to them to qualify for a bowl game.
And the last thing I got for you, this week, Arkansas actually opened as I think a 2.5 point favorite this weekend. It's the first time they've been favored in Death Valley since 2001, based on my research. Did that line surprise you at all? I mean, and how do you think this game plays out this weekend?
With this season, nothing surprises me, honestly. I figured it would be close. I wasn't surprised, honestly. I don't really know. Like, I'm really intrigued to see. This is one of those games that it could go either way. Honestly, I think it depends on which LSU team shows up. If the team we saw last week shows up, then I think LSU might take it. But we've seen letdowns from them previously this season, and they play games where you think they should have it, and they don't, or then they play Florida and they just run all over them. And obviously Florida is not as good as what they were thought to be. But I think this could go either way. I think Arkansas has a really good shot in this one. And I think we'll just have to wait and see. It'll depend on which LSU team shows up, honestly.
That's kind of what I've been feeling, and even said that on the radio today. So, but again, that's all I got for you today, Julie. Thanks again for giving us some insight on the Tigers. I know all of our subscribers and people watching this are really appreciative of that. As a reminder to everyone, kickoff this weekend is scheduled for 6:30, and you can watch it on the SEC Network. And if you're watching this on YouTube right now, be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you always get these Know the Foe segments, the press conferences, practice clips, recruiting breakdowns, and much, much more. And of course, head on over to HawgBeat.com for coverage of all things Hogs.